Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Stand Up with Are Kalvø, the Norwegian comedian. Dobrý večer, dámy a pánové. Vítám vás na stand-upovém představení norského komika Are Kalvøho, který je mimo jiné autorem této knihy, kterou vydalo nakladatelství Host. Dnešní večer spolupořádá nakladatelství Host norské velvyslanectví a skandinávský dům, kterým tímto děkujeme. A kromě toho bych ještě ráda uvítala tady Evu Dohnálkovou, která bude tlumočit debatu poté, co zahájíme, poté, co po tom stand-upu máte možnost pokládat otázky přímo do diskuze na Facebooku a určitě se na ně dostane řada, bude na ně odpovězeno po tom představení. Takže doufám, že jste všichni pohodlně usazeni a vychutnáte si tuto chvíli s Arem Kalvøem. Hei, Are, velkommen. Jeg har bare sagt et par ord om deg og om hvordan det vil foregå, så nå er ordet ditt, og vi skal følge med. Takk for at du kunne komme og bli med oss.
Tusen takk. Thank you, and welcome everybody. Good to see you, even though I can't see you, but I hope you're there somewhere. I am in Norway, and I'm actually sitting down, even though this is a stand-up event, but I will try to speak like a stand-up comedian, even though I'm sitting down and talking to you on a screen. I'm here today, as she possibly told you, I didn't understand a word of what she said because my Czech is that bad. I'm here to talk to you about this book, and I am speaking to you in this book and now as a representative of a small and up until recently silent Norwegian minority, because I am a Norwegian who doesn't really like nature. I think it's overrated. I don't go for long walks in the woods. I don't go hiking. I think mountains are nice to look at if you sit somewhere with tables and chairs and waiters, preferably. I love waiters, one of mankind's greatest inventions. In short, I'm really not an outdoors kind of guy. I have long been of the opinion that if someone has gone to such great lengths to invent things like walls, ceilings, and hotel bars, then it's downright ungrateful to go off and sleep in a tent. Now, this, of course, is not what you're supposed to think of the great outdoors if you are a Norwegian. After all, I do come from a country of great scenic beauty. I come from a country of great polar explorers. Or were they great? Really? In many cases, to be perfectly honest, I don't really see the point of what the great polar explorers did. Take Roald Amundsen, for example, the first man ever to reach the South Pole in 1911. We're very proud of him in Norway. This is what he actually did. He started at a cold spot surrounded by snow and ice, and then he walked for weeks through cold spots surrounded by snow and ice, until one day, finally, he reached a cold spot surrounded by snow and ice. Now, to many people, this seems pointless. To many Norwegians, it doesn't. To me, it does, kind of. But at least Roald Amundsen and the other polar explorers made history. At least they were the first people in the history of mankind to do something, the first people ever to reach somewhere. People who go hiking now aren't the first people to do anything, or the first people to reach anywhere. In most cases, actually, they don't reach anywhere at all. They just end up back where they began, 8 hours later, wetter and colder. So why do people do this? Because they do, more than ever. According to a recent survey, 80% of people in Norway regularly go hiking. That's 80, not 18, 80%. And that's on average, in my age group, which is the death-fearing age between 40 and 60, the number is even higher than that. And this number has been growing for the past 30 to 40 years and growing rapidly for the past 10 or so years, which also means that the minority I belong to, we who don't go hiking, is a small minority, getting smaller as I speak, probably. This could be because up until recently, this minority has had no spokesperson. This minority has been living in silence and shame. This minority has had no voice. But that is about to change. Because a couple of years ago, I wrote this book, released this book in Norway. Not this book, I released the Norwegian version in Norway because most Norwegians don't read Czech. This is the Czech edition, which is also out now. And it's a very good book. But I wrote this book and I released it in Norway. The title was Hyttebok fra helvete, which literally means the cabin book from hell. The English title is The Hiking Book from Hell. The Czech title, apparently, is Hory, peklo, which means something to do with nature and hell. I assume my Czech is very bad. It also says something here and here. I don't know what. I'm sorry. But what I've realized since I released this book in Norway, what I've realized when talking about this book to people and when researching the book is that Norwegians simply aren't used to hearing about, talking about, or reading about nature and hiking unless it's all praise and awe. They aren't used to hearing fairly obvious things like walking for hours in the rain is actually quite annoying. Or sometimes being outside in the open is just okay. Surely it's not mind-blowingly fantastic every time. Come on. These are surprisingly unusual things to say if you are a Norwegian. Because if you are from a country like Norway, which is a country with more trees than people, more rocks than fun, then you are supposed to love nature. You are expected to think that it's only outside, on your own, in the mountains or in the forests, that you are who you truly are. Now, why is this the case? Still, now that we don't have to go out into nature, most of us have nothing to do there anymore, then why are we still doing it? Now more than ever, actually. This is what I wanted to find out because, well, I just don't get it. And mind you, it's not that I am an arrogant, ignorant city boy. It's not that at all. On the contrary, I grew up on a farm in a town of 3,000 people in the countryside in Western Norway, surrounded by fjords and beautiful dramatic mountains and hiking trails and ski slopes. When you visit the place where I grew up, you simply have to take pictures. You cannot not take pictures when you're there. The mountains are simply too dramatic. The fjords are too fjordsy. And the farm where I grew up with its old wooden houses, simply too picturesque. I grew up in Instagram, basically. So I'm not an ignorant city boy who's just unfamiliar with nature. That's not it at all. And it's not that I don't like walking either. I love walking. Walking is one of my favorite things, but I don't walk the way I should. I like walking in places where there are people and ideally waiters. I like walking around city centers, just wandering around without needing to be anywhere in particular. Not many people did this in my hometown when I was growing up. Walking simply wasn't something you did in the center of town. Getting into a car, driving to the foot of a mountain, walking up to the top of that mountain and back down again, getting back into your car and driving back home, that was considered perfectly normal. Walking around the town center without any particular plan, that was considered seriously weird. This is how I grew up. So I should be an outdoors person. I'm not. So what happened? Well, I moved to the city, as did most of my friends. I moved to the city. I liked the city. I enjoyed the city and loved my life. And this has never been a problem until recently. Because apparently, to most people, this doesn't last. It passes. Something happens when you become an adult, have a career, have a family, settle down. In short, when you reach the age when bouncers have stopped asking you for ID and have started asking you whether you're entirely sure that this is the place for you. When you reach this age, something happens. Your values and priorities change. And you realize that you actually love nature and that it's only out there in the open on your own that you are who you truly are. This has happened to almost everyone I know, but not me. I have lost so many friends to nature in recent years. Good people, smart people, people who used to be fun, people who used to go to the pub with me and laugh and joke and enjoy the company of others. What are they doing now? They get up early, take pictures of a ski trail, put them on Facebook and Instagram, and write, "Lovely day in the woods." These are people I once considered good friends, and witty too. Lovely day in the woods. That's the best they can do now. Clearly, this is something that happens to a lot of people at a certain age. You start to lose your sense of humor, and your hair, if you're a man. They start to go at about the same time, I've noticed. I'm actually starting to worry that there might be a correlation between sense of humor and hair. No, really. All right, you start to lose your sense of humor and your hair. You start working out, obviously, in the hope of looking as good as possible without a sense of humor and hair. Many changes occur at this age. You don't necessarily stop going out when you reach this age, but you start going out to places where there's not so much noise or bouncers or people. Because when you reach this age, you want to meet your friends to talk about unbelievably boring stuff, because that also happens at this age. Men this age, which is my age, are sometimes evasive. We're a bit unclear when we're answering questions from our partners about what really happened on that last trip with the lads. That's not because something outrageous happened or because we can't remember what happened. No, we're evasive, we're unclear because we'd rather not admit that we've been sitting in a pub in London for 3 days talking about pension plans, or even worse, about hiking or nature. Because it's not just that everybody's suddenly out and about in nature. They won't stop talking about it either. And they talk about it without any trace of humor. People who were once fun, now in all seriousness, say things like, "The silence in the mountains is unlike anything else." No, it isn't. It's exactly like any other silence. That's the thing with silence. It's silent. Another thing they often say is, it's only when you're surrounded by nature that you understand how small you really are. Seriously. If it's only when surrounded by nature that you understand how small you really are, then your ego is too big. And also they say, on our holiday this year, we're going to keep it simple. We're going to walk from cabin to cabin in the mountains. People do this in Norway. But that's not a holiday. Walking from cabin to cabin in the mountains is at best a kind of holiday that only includes the two most boring things about being on holiday: packing and transportation. But people do this voluntarily. They walk from cabin to cabin for days on end, the sweat and their sense of humor oozing from their pores. With huge backsacks, they walk to remote, primitive cabins with ridiculous names that are impossible to understand. Very few of these cabins in Norwegian nature have names that are possible to understand, and that also make it impossible to understand why anyone would want to go there on holiday. For instance, one of these cabins is called Myggheim, which literally means home of the mosquito. People voluntarily go on holiday to the home of the mosquito. I recently looked up everyone I have ever known on Facebook and Instagram. They now live different lives, have different jobs, different families, but all of them, and I do mean all of them, have pictures of mountains. I am friends with no one who has never, ever posted one single picture of a mountain. When did this happen? Was there a meeting I was invited to? Who kidnapped my friends and replaced them with a bunch of goody-goody outdoor types? I know single people who complain about losing touch with their friends when their friends get girlfriends or boyfriends, and I can sympathize with that. But at least they're losing their friends to something amazing, to love. I'm losing my friends to rocks and trees. And as I mentioned earlier, this isn't just my friends, it's everybody, or 80% of everybody at least. And it's spreading. Young people are going hiking. Pensioners are hiking. Everyone is hiking in nature. Everyone except me. Now, unless you are a psychopath, you eventually start wondering, could it be possible that I am the weirdo, that all the others are actually right, and I'm the one who just don't get it? Why don't I feel this pull towards nature when everyone else does? Why don't I long to experience silence unlike anything else? So eventually I caved in. I decided, all right, I will go hiking. And I went hiking for the first time in 30 years. And I did this to write the book, of course, but also to find answers to questions like, what are people doing up there in the mountains? Why do normal, sane people take pictures of themselves with their arms outstretched on top of mountains? And what makes them think that the rest of us want to see these pictures? And I have other questions too about the outdoor people, like, are they perhaps a bit naive? Bear with me, there's a reason for this question. But let me first talk you through the concept of walking cabin to cabin in Norway. What you do is this. There is a Norwegian hiking association. When you become a member of this association, you get a key. This key gives you access to about 500 cabins all over nature in Norway. At the moment, this association has about 300,000 members. Now, in other countries where you can also walk from cabin to cabin, these cabins are sometimes a bit like hotels. The Norwegian cabins are nothing like hotels, and they're proud of that. That's actually the point. You sleep in tiny beds in your own sleeping bag, often in rooms together with many others, if you're lucky. Sometimes you have to sleep on the floor or wherever they can fit you. You share a shower with way too many others, which is the reason why most people staying in these cabins simply don't shower. At a given time, you're served a meal, which is basic, boring Norwegian food, and then everybody stands in line for food, most of them wearing woolen underwear, stinking of sweat. You don't dress up for dinner in these cabins, you dress down. And these are actually the most luxurious of the cabins. Many of the cabins have no service at all, or electricity, or running water. And many Norwegians consider this to be the true cabins. You have the key, you unlock the door, and then you're on your own. You have to find water, you have to light a fire, make food, if you remember to bring some. If you didn't, you have to go out into nature and get some. And then you go to bed, maybe all alone. And this is why I ask if outdoor people perhaps are a bit naive. Now, our high level of trust is often considered a good thing about the Nordic countries, but is there such a thing as too much trust? Is it really a good idea to go to sleep in a remote place where no one can hear your cries for help, in a cabin to which 300,000 people have the key? So, are they naive? And finally, the main question about the outdoor people. Is it really true that the reason everybody's out and about in nature now is that it is only out there that you are who you truly are? Now, to this question, I actually have an answer. My research paid off. I think it's the other way around. I think we go hiking, we go out into the wild, because it's only out there that we are who we truly are not. Out there, we can pretend to be something we have never been, but we think our forefathers were, and we would like to think there's still a little of it left inside of us, even though we are now very modern people. Although it's true that most people in Norway are out in nature, it is also true, both in Norway and in most other countries, that the higher your income is, the higher your education is, the more likely it is that you are an outdoor person. In other words, educated, well-paid people from one of the wealthiest countries in the world spend ridiculous amounts of money on hiking equipment so that they can walk for hours until they reach a cabin where they can pretend to be poor, standing in line for food in their underwear, sleeping on the floor, lighting their own fire, chopping their own wood, living like they don't have to live, being who they truly are not. Pretending is a major part of outdoor life, pretending and lying. Pretending that even though you don't have to, even though you are a very modern man, you can still conquer nature. You are still, at heart, a man of the wild. This is what we like to pretend. Because the alternative would be to admit that you're doing all this just because you're losing your hair and your sense of humor. And you're really, really, really afraid of dying. And surely it can't be that simple, can it? Thank you. Thank you.
Hjertelig takk skal du ha. Det var mer morsomt, det var morsommere enn i Frankfurt.
Velmi děkuji. Bylo to podstatně vtipnější, než když jsem to slyšela ve Frankfurtu na veletrhu.
Og jeg har et par spørsmål, og jeg håper vi får også spørsmål fra publikum.
Já mám pár otázek a doufám, že nějaké otázky ještě přijdou od našeho publika.
Og det første har du fått svar på alle dine spørsmål?
A moje první otázka je, podařilo se vám získat odpovědi na všechny ty svoje otázky?
Nei, ikke alle. Det fremdeles ganske mange ting som jeg synes vanskelig å forstå med hele utendørs spetakkelet. Men jeg forstår, jeg tror jeg har avslørt ganske mye av hva som den egentlige grunnen til at folk ute i naturen. Det tror jeg.
Nepodařilo se mi získat odpovědi na všechny ty otázky, ale podařilo se mi určitě něco zjistit a myslím si, že jsem prostě zjistil to, co lidi drží u té přírody, proč tam chodí.
Hva den grunnen da?
A co to je?
Jeg mistenker jo at hovedgrunnen, og den grunnen jeg forstår best, handler om helse, og du vil ha god form, og du har nådd en alder der du begynner å bekymre deg for at du skal dø ung. Og da skjønner jeg at du drar ut i naturen. Men folk har en tendens til å ikke være fornøyd med den forklaringen, så jeg skal finne en litt mer høgverdig forklaring, nesten religiøs forklaring, og det det jeg sliter mer med.
Myslím si, že ten základní důvod je zdraví, že to, když lidé budou chodit na výlety a na tury do přírody, tak budou zdraví a bude to déle trvat, než se dostanou do hrobu. Ale myslím si, že tady tenhle důvod většině lidí nestačí. Snaží se, nebo potřeboval bych ještě zjistit, jestli je nějaký vyšší cíl nebo nějaký vyšší záměr, a to se mi zatím ještě nepodařilo zjistit.
I boka så skriver du også om at naturen på en måte erstatter Gud. Det dette det henger sammen med?
V knize píšete i o tom, že příroda svým způsobem nahrazuje Boha. Myslíte si, že tohle může být ten důvod, proč lidé tak milují pobyt v přírodě?
Ja, måten naturentusiaster snakker om naturen på kan ligne ganske mye på måten religiøse folk snakker om Gud på, og religiøse folk kan forklare vårt behov for religion med at vi trenger noe som vanskelig å forstå, noe som større enn oss selv. Og alt dette her jo akkurat de samme tingene som naturentusiaster sier når de skal beskrive hvorfor vi andre ikke skjønner hvor fantastisk det der ute i naturen. Det større enn oss selv. Det vanskelig å forklare.
Lidé, kteří milují přírodu nebo pobyt v přírodě, tak o tom často hovoří, tak jako kdyby to bylo něco náboženského, nebo používají tu terminologii věřících, mluví o přírodě jako o tom, o něčem, co je větší než my, o něčem, co nás přesahuje, takže v tomhle se to hodně podobá.
Tak. Den tjeckiske titelen du også har lest opp, den betyr egentlig himmel, helvete, paradis, som en assosiasjon til en barnelek. Fordi vi mangler faktisk det ordet for hyttebok. Det har vi ikke. Vi har noe som heter besøksbok. Og det kan man ha både på hytta, men det kan man ha for eksempel den norske ambassaden har også en sånn bok hvor gjestene kan skrive sitt navn i og sånn. Hvordan liker du den tjekkiske titelen? Den like bra som den tyske som du roste da du var i Frankfurt, som Frei Lufthöhle?
Česky se kniha jmenuje Hory, peklo, ráj, což by mělo, nebo odkazuje to na dětskou hru Nebe, peklo, ráj. Protože v češtině nám chybí ta hyttebuka, to je tedy ta návštěvní kniha nebo chatový deník, takže jsme museli použít tento překlad. A jak se vám ten český název líbí? Vím, že se vám hodně líbil i ten německý, Frei Lufthöhle, to je volnost, vzduch, peklo. Jak jste spokojený s tím českým názvem?
Jeg liker den tjekkiske titelen veldig godt nå, når jeg har fått den forklart, for at først så skjønte ikke han helt, men det fordi at jeg kjente ikke til den barneregler som den assosierer med. Men nå gjør jeg det, så da liker jeg den titelen veldig godt. Og jeg er klar over at hyttebok jo et umulig ord å oversette, for at i de fleste land så jo gjestebøker, som du sier, noe som kan ligge på en ambassade eller på en restaurant. Men det jo sannsynligvis typisk at Norge må ha et eget ord for en gjestebok som ligger på hytta, på fjellet eller i skog.
Teď, když jste mi objasnili ten český název, že to odkazuje na tu dětskou hru, tak se mi samozřejmě líbí. Líbí se mi víc než předtím, protože předtím jsem vůbec nevěděl, co to znamená. A chápu, že to slovo hyttebuka může být těžké nějak přenést do ostatních jazyků a že to asociuje něco jako tu návštěvní knihu někde na ambasádě. Ale taky zároveň rozumím tomu, že Norové prostě musí mít slovo, který ve svém základu zase bude mít něco nějak souvisejícího s turistikou a s chatami, takže je jasné, že my tam tu hyttebuku prostě mít musíme.
Ja, tjekkere drar også veldig mye på hytter, og spesielt vi har noe som vi har to forskjellige konsepter, hytte og sommerhus, men man drar på sånne hus på landet også, ikke bare under sommeren. Men vi har en lang tradisjon for turgåing også, og faktisk så det 40 000 merkede stier i Tsjekkia som faktisk mer enn i Norge, og Tsjekkia et lite land. Men vi mister ikke venner for naturen. Jeg har ikke sånt inntrykk. Tror du det kommer med økende velstand at Norge på en måte har livsnivå så høyt, og når vi I Tsjekkia også kommer på dette nivået, at vi får oppleve dette også?
I v Čechách máme velkou turistickou tradici. Máme tady 40 000 kilometrů značených stezek, což je víc než v Norsku. A to jsme velmi malá země. Ale myslím, že třeba já se rozhodně nemusím bát, že bych kvůli přírodě přicházela o své přátele. Myslíte si, že to nějak souvisí se vzrůstající životní úrovní, že nás to taky postihne? Máme se začít bát, že když na tom budeme lépe ekonomicky, takže se z nás stanou takový velcí milovníci přírody?
Det korte svaret på det spørsmålet ja.
Krátká odpověď je ano.
For å utdype litt, så var det historisk sett, så har jeg også I Norge friluftsliv vært et fenomen først og fremst for velstående byfolk med mye fritid. Men etter hvert så har jo Norge utviklet seg sånn at I Norge jo nesten alle nå velstående byfolk med for mye fritid. Så når du når dit, så forsvinner nok alle vennene dine ut I skogen og på fjellet.
No, I v Norsku to bylo vlastně ze začátku tak, že pobyt v přírodě to byla záliba těch dobře situovaných měšťáků, ale vzhledem k tomu, že v Norsku jsou teď vlastně všichni dobře situovaní měšťáci nebo prostě dobře situovaní lidé, tak předpokládám, že se vám to stane úplně stejně. Jakmile budou lidi zajištění, tak všichni zmizí do lesů.
Ja, det var litt trist å høre.
Det smutné.
Vi har noen spørsmål fra publikum. Eva spør Ares beste ferie. Og hun spør på norsk faktisk. Men ja, hva din forestilling om beste ferie?
Otázka z publika. Are, jaká je vaše, jak si představujete nejkrásnější dovolenou?
Sannsynligvis så finner du svaret på det når du etter 1,5 år med lockdown snakker om hva den første plassen du har lyst til å reise til når det blir lov å reise igjen. Og for meg var det helt klart at det var, jeg skal til en stor by, og gjerne til London. Så London ble den første turen, og det jo det som favorittferie. Det ikke nødvendigvis London, men en ganske stor by med ganske mange kelnere og ganske mye folk.
Je to něco jako když po půl roce v lockdownu si naplánujete nějakou dovolenou, tak pro mě rozhodně by to bylo návštěva velkého města, nějakého velkého města, ideálně Londýna, ale vlastně by to nemusel být vůbec Londýn, prostě nějaký město, kde je hodně číšníků a hodně lidí.
Tak. Neste spørsmål fra publikum. Hvordan ble boka mottatt I Norge? Fordi sikkert det mange som finner den veldig, veldig morsom. Jeg finner den morsom. Men har du fått andre reaksjoner også?
Další otázka z publika. Jakého přijetí se knize dostalo v Norsku? Já sama si myslím, že je vtipná, ale byly I nějaké jiné reakce?
De fleste har sagt at de synes det morsomt. Nå jo det veldig vanskelig å innrømme at du ikke har selvironi, så jeg vil jo tro at folk vil jo gjerne si det. Men det som morsomt at både folk som elsker friluftsliv og folk som hater friluftsliv har funnet noe I denne boka som de synes morsomt. Den andre reaksjonen jeg har fått som litt interessant fra sånn friluftselskere som faktisk ikke tror på meg. Jeg tror at jeg ikke snakker sant, at jeg bare finner på dette her for å være morsom og for å lage en bok som skal selge. men jeg mener det. Men det tror jeg faktisk ikke på en del av det.
Tak většina lidí říká, že ta kniha je vtipná. Těžko říct, jestli v tom někdy není nějaká ironie, ale zajímavé je, že i milovníci přírody, kterým ta kniha přijde vtipná, tak ti si myslí, že jsem to nemyslel vážně, prostě mi nevěří, ale já jsem to vážně myslel, prostě to tak cítím.
Ja, betyr det at alt du skriver i boka sant?
Znamená to, že všechno, co jste v té knize napsali, je pravda.
Også om den vakuumpakkede maten og alt sånt?
I to s tím vakuově baleným jídlem a tak?
Ja, altså alt det jeg gjennomførte jo 2 ganske sånn omfattende turer i naturen. En på vinterstid, en på sommerstid, for å skrive boka. Og alt som står i boka om de turene er sant. Alt det skjedde. Og denne her turmaten som vi hadde med, den går jo ikke an for normale mennesker å ete. Sånn er det bare. Det er jo sant.
Je to tak. Všechno je to naprostá pravda. Já jsem podnikl 2 takové poměrně rozsáhlé výlety, jeden v zimě a jeden v létě a prostě všecko se to stalo, všecko je to pravda a to jídlo vakuově balené nejde jíst. Normální člověk by to prostě nejet.
Stakkars dere.
Dáci.
Vi har et spørsmål til fra publikum, også på norsk. Hei alle. Are, tusen takk for stand-upen. Har du noen i Oslo? Altså stand-up. Opptrer du nå i Oslo med dette eller med noe annet?
Tak, otázka z publika. Are, moc děkuju za stand-up. Je možné vás vidět v Oslu? No, vystupujete i v Oslu?
Ja, ikke med dette stoffet, men med en ny forestilling som hadde premiere nå i høst. Så opptrer jeg i Oslo nå og da frem til jul og januar og februar.
Ano, je možné mě vidět i v Oslu. Ne s tímhle představením, ale s jiným, které teďka chystám na podzim. Od podzimu do Vánoc a i v lednu a v únoru.
Takk. Og hva dreier det seg om? Hva er det nå? Hva handler det om?
To bude?
Den handler om noe jeg faktisk liker, i motsetning til friluftsliv. Så nå har jeg laget en forestilling om popmusikk og være glad i popmusikk.
Tady to vystoupení bude o něčem, co mám rád, co mám skutečně rád, ne jako chození do přírody. A bude to o populární hudbě, o pop music.
Så fint. Skal du også skrive en bok om det?
A napíšete o tom taky nějakou knihu? Ano.
Ja, den kommer på norsk i morgen, tror jeg.
Gratulerer!
Zítra vychází v norštině, takže gratulujeme.
Jeg håper at folk fra forlaget hører på oss nå, og at den også blir aktuelt på tjekkisk.
Doufám, že nás teď poslouchají i lidé z nakladatelství Host a že to bude aktuální i v Čechách.
Enig.
Bitte litt tilbake til de tingene du ikke liker. Har du vært på fjelltur siden prosjektet?
Zpátky k tomu, co nemáte tolikrát, a to tedy chození do přírody. Byl jste od té doby někde na výletě?
Nei.
Ne.
Jeg er blitt invitert av veldig mange som skal overbevise meg om at det egentlig er fantastisk, men jeg var sterk, og jeg klarte å si nei, takk.
Dostalo se mi mnoha pozvání od lidí, kteří mě chtěli přesvědčit, že jsem to asi nepochopil, ale stál jsem si za svým a řekla jsem ne.
Så det blir ikke noen flere turer i naturen på det i framtiden? Eller tror du at du holder dette liksom åpent, at det kan komme?
Takže žádné další výlety, nebo si myslíte, že to necháváte jako otevřené a třeba někdy v budoucnu se vydáte?
Altså, jeg har sett det skje før med folk jeg ikke trodde det om i det hele tatt, så jeg skal ikke avvise det totalt, men jeg tviler veldig sterkt på at jeg noensinne kommer til å bli en naturens mann. Hvis jeg går i fjellet, så nå en gang til, så det sannsynligvis fordi at den samme gjengen som gikk i fjellet i forbindelse med denne boka, skal ha en reunion-tur, som sannsynligvis da blir veldig mye kortere enn den første turen.
No, nikdy neříkám nikdy, ale pravděpodobně se ze mě nikdy nestane žádný velký milovník přírody, ale možná v budoucnu, pokud by se na nějakou túru vydala skupina těch lidí, o kterých píšu ve své knize, že bychom měli nějaké další setkání, tak bych možná to ještě zvážil, ale určitě by to nebyl tak dlouhý výlet, jako ten, který je v knize.
Ja, og den vil sikkert inneholde mer cigarillos og mer øldrikking og sånn.
A určitě by tam bylo víc doutníčků a víc pití.
Ja.
Det forstår jeg. Ok. Tusen hjertelig takk for en sånn fin stand-up og for den muligheten å snakke med deg. Det var så hyggelig. Og takk for den boka, og vi gleder oss til den nye boka.
Srdečné díky za stand-up. A velmi děkujeme za knihu a těšíme se na tu novou.
Tusen takk selv. Takk.
Ha det bra. Lykke til.
Ha det.
Takk til Eva.
Děkuji. Nashledanou.
Děkuji moc Evě Dohnálkové za bezvadné tlumočení a děkuji Skandinávskému domu za přenos a za pozvání. Děkujeme i norskému velvyslanectví. Takk til den norske ambassade, til Are Kalvø, til Skandinavský dom og til Eva. Og takk for oss. Ha det bra, ha en hyggelig kveld. Mějte se krásně.